Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. मुंहिंजो नालो अमानुल्लाह सांदा आहे ऐं मुंहिंजी मादरी ॿोली सिंधी आहे. It's International Mother Language Day webinar series and अॼोको ॾींहुं February 21 2022 मादरी ॿोलियुनि जे आलमी ॾींहं तौरु मल्हायो वञे पियो. Teacher Development Webinars is a social action project to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. And we are celebrating International Mother Language Day webinar series that aims to celebrate linguistic diversity and multilingualism. We intend to promote awareness of equity and inclusion in education through discussions about linguistic human rights, importance of mother tongues, language sensitization, and other concerns about language. And now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Dr. Shahid Siddiqui for this webinar. Dr. Shahid Siddiqui is a renowned educationist, linguist, teacher, researcher, academic administrator, and a prolific writer for the last 3 decades. Dr. Siddiqui has worked in several prestigious universities such as Aga Khan University, LUMS, Allama Iqbal Open University, and to name a few. Currently, he's Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences at Lahore School of Economics. He is the author of Rethinking Education in Pakistan, Perception, Practices, and Possibilities, Education, Inequalities, and Freedom, a Socio-Political Critique, Language, Gender, and Power, the Politics of Representation and Hegemony in South Asia, Education Policies in Pakistan, Politics, Projections, and Practices, Aadhi Adhure Khwab, a novel, Zere Asma, Mausam-e Khushrang, and Adhura Khwab. What a pleasure it is to have you at Teacher Development Webinars today, Dr. Shahid Saab. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. और आपको आलमी ज़बानों का जो दिन है वो मुबारक हो.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And all those who are from Pakistan, Assalamu alaikum. And मुझे बड़ी खुशी है कि आपके साथ मुझे कुछ वक्त बिताने का मौका मिल रहा है. Those from outside Pakistan, welcome. And I hope that we'll have some good time interacting with each other. Today is a very important day, 21st February. It is celebrated world over as Mother Tongue Day. But I think there is a background to it. And today, when I will be sharing with you, some of my points regarding language politics in Pakistan, you will come to know the background of 21st February as well. And then this will be a kind of, case study of Pakistan, how, what were the constraints and difficulties and what kind of politics was involved in the, linguistic choices in Pakistan. So welcome again. And I am sharing with you, just a minute, my slides. And yeah.
Yes. Could you make it on full screen?
Yeah. Can you see the slide, please?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So the topic is the politics of language choices in Pakistan. And but I think before we actually go into it, it's very important to revisit the phenomenon of language. Because being a student of linguistics, when I look at it, I can see that how conservative viewpoint about language is quite different from contemporary view of language. Because in the past, language was considered as a neutral and passive, phenomenon, and just as a tool of communication, nothing more than that. But now I think, after some very useful researches, for instance, Sepper and Wolf hypothesis research, we realize that language is not that innocent. Language is not neutral. language is not apolitical. On the contrary, language is a very political phenomenon, which is directly linked with politics and power. Um, and in a minute, I'll unpack this notion of power as well. Um, so, in modern times, in contemporary times, language is considered as a very, potent tool of construction of realities. So gone are the days when language was seen as just a tool of communication. Now we look at language uh, as, as something which is very powerful, which is involved in the construction of realities, and also it is involved in the perpetuation of stereotypes and belief system from one generation to the other generation. This means that language has always been used as a tool by imperialist powers to take control of things and B, to sustain that control. And if you link it with what, Gramsci's view of hegemony in his book, Prison Notebooks, when he talks about two approaches to hegemony. One is the political approach that uses force or coercion, and the other is civil society approach that does not, involve force or coercion, but uses education and language and literature and culture as a very important means to hegemonize others, to take control of others' minds. So language plays a very important part in that. And later on, we can see this nexus between power and discourse, knowledge in Foucault's work as well. Also, language is a very potent identity marker at individual level and at national level. So I think this was very important to have this discussion because later on, when we go to different language policies in Pakistan, we need to realize that language is a very important factor in terms of identity, in terms of construction of social realities, in terms of taking control. When Pakistan came into being in 1947, we got freedom. India and Pakistan both got freedom from the British Raj. For Pakistan, there were some major, language questions. And the first and foremost question was, what should be the national language of the country? And then what will be the status of English, the colonial language? Another very important question was, how will be the provincial regional languages conserved and promoted? Yet another question was, what language should be used as a medium of instruction? And then which language or languages should be mandatorily taught in the educational institutions? These were some questions, apart from some other challenges of education Pakistan was facing. Those problems included the problem of access, because there were not many schools available. Another problem was the problem of quality. Another problem was problem of dropout. Yet another problem was that of relevance of the kind of education which was being given in schools, and what was being practiced in society, and what were the needs of society. Apart from those educational challenges, language posed another very important challenge. And first and foremost was, what should be the national language of this newborn country, Pakistan? Well, in 1947, this is the year when Pakistan came into being. first educational conference was organized. And there it was discussed that Urdu should be the national language. And this recommendation was given by that conference. And why? Because Urdu is a kind of lingua franca. It's a common language. It is understood in different provinces of Pakistan. So let Urdu be the national language. Some members suggested that Urdu should be the medium of instruction in each province. Now, those of you who are very young, and let me share with you that when Pakistan came into being, there were two provinces of Pakistan. One was East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, and the other was the West Pakistan. And in East Pakistan, predominantly, people would speak Bangla language. That was their mother tongue. And they were in majority, right? So can you just go back and look at this recommendation of the conference that some members suggested that Urdu should also be the medium of instruction in each province, which means in East Pakistan as well. Other members suggested that the question of medium of instruction should be left to each province to decide, but Urdu should be compulsory. Urdu should be a compulsory language. Among those who were attending this conference, the DPI East Bengal felt that Urdu should not be a provincial language, right? Because they could see that people whose mother tongue was Bangla, they would be feeling they would find it very difficult if Urdu becomes a compulsory language or Urdu becomes the medium of instruction. Followed by that, in 1948, the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, visited East Pakistan, Dhaka, and he made a speech there in University of Dhaka. And here is a quote from that speech. "There can be only one state language if the component parts of this state are to march forward in unison, and that language, in my opinion, can only be Urdu." So that was the scenario. But before we move forward, I think, again, I would go back and share with you that at that time, Bangla-speaking Pakistanis were in majority. They were around 60% or more than 60% whose mother tongue was Bangla. And second largest group was of Punjabis. Urdu was spoken by just 4% people. Urdu was mother tongue of 4% people. So that was the linguistic scenario. And we were involved in this, discussion, which should be the national language. And after first national conference in 1947, and after Jinnah's speech here, and where he says that can only be Urdu, this national language can only be Urdu, it was decided that Urdu is going to be the national language. Now, as I said before, in 1947, when Pakistan came into being, there were two majority groups, Bengalis and Punjabis. So as far as Punjabis are concerned, there was no protest against that why Urdu is made the national language. And there could be some reasons, right? For instance, Bangla has no affinity with Urdu, right? Whereas Punjabi has a lot of affinity with Urdu. And then Bangla language has very rich academic tradition. It was, a language of schools and colleges, and there was a rich literature available there. And Bengalis were proud of their own language, which was not the case with urban Punjabis, who would speak with their children in Urdu. Um, and another difference between these two groups was that Punjabis were close to or part of those power domains, whereas Bangla speaking or Bengalis were away from those power domains. If you look at the headquarters of forces, they were all situated um, in West Pakistan. Um, so let me. Okay, so there was a severe reaction in East Pakistan. Reaction was that why not, Bangla was selected as national language. It's important point to discuss that, the normal practice as far as colonies were concerned, when they got freedom, there were usually, there were two options. A, that they should retain the language of their masters, as some countries did in Africa. The second option was that if they don't retain the language of their masters, uh, then the language of majority group should be the national language of the country. In case of Pakistan, we did not opt for either of these two. Right? We opted for a third, choice, that is Urdu, which was not the language of majority, which was not the language spoken by the masters, was declared as national language. And there were reasons for that. The most important reason for Urdu was that Urdu was not just a language, as we discussed in the beginning. It was a political, tool, and in our, movement, where Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah was, making a case that we are a different nation. Language was also presented as one of those, dissimilarities, uh, because we claim that Urdu is the language of Muslims, so we have a different language. So people have a very kind of emotional association with this language because it played a very important part in the Pakistan movement. Second important reason for making Urdu as a national language was that it was a kind of common language. It was understood, and people could speak in all the provinces. So this was the case for Urdu. But people in Bangladesh who were 60%, around 60%, they were not saying that Urdu should not be the national language. They were saying that let Bangla should be another national language besides Urdu, right? And we see this kind of arrangement in a number of countries. For instance, in Canada, English and French both are important languages, state languages. So that was the demand, that Bangla and Urdu should be the national languages. As far as Punjabis are concerned, they were very comfortable with, Urdu. And I shared with you the reasons that there is a lot of affinity between Urdu and Punjabi. And there was not, Punjabi had never been the language used in schools as a medium of instruction. And Punjabis were part of, those power domains. So they didn't feel any reason to protest. But there was a severe protest in East Pakistan. Um, so much so that on 21st February, that is the date today, 1952, a procession was taken out from University of Dhaka, right? And they were chanting in favor of Bangla, that Bangla should be the national language of Pakistan, besides Urdu. And here, the procession was dealt with force, and there were some casualties here, and this led to some violent reaction in East Pakistan. So before I move forward, I think this date, 21st February, is the date where we every year we have this 21st February as Mother Tongue Day. I think it is linked with that incident that took place in 1952 on 21st February in University of Dhaka. Violent, reaction followed by this incident. And in 1956, finally, Bangla was declared as a second national language. In 1959, a commission was formed to look at the issues of education in Pakistan and recommend some way out. And in that report, it is written that Urdu and Bengali have now been officially declared to be the national languages of Pakistan. And therefore, the question of their adoption in place of English in the educational system is no longer a matter of debate. So whenever I look at this statement, I cannot understand. Maybe they could not understand the severity of this problem. They thought that everything is now okay. And in this report, a timeline was given that in the coming 10 or 15 years, Urdu will take central place in place of English. Right? This was the recommendation. And they said that education in a foreign language places an enormous strain on students, forcing them to memorize and to spend an undue proportion of their time on learning the language. When we say that, so on one hand, so this tussle was going on, dilemma that on one hand, because it was political correct at that time to bash, foreign language. And then when we say that national languages should be given their due place, it does not mean that we are unmindful of the great importance of English in our national language. So, you can see this movement. Sometimes they were focusing on the, significance of English. At the same time, they would say, no, it's foreign language. And this tension you can see right from 1947 up till now. And from the same report I am quoting, the national languages should gradually and progressively replace English as the medium of instruction at all levels, right? And this gradually, they did not, they said that in 10 to 15 years, we should make every effort to develop our national languages to the level at which they can become effective media of instruction at the highest stages of education. So this is what was professed, but in terms of practice, I think no concrete measures were taken, and we did not make any practical, attempt towards this goal. And then in 1971, important thing happened in the history of Pakistan, that East Pakistan, was no more there with us. Now it is Bangladesh. So in 1971, one part of Pakistan was lost. And I think that, experience taught us that how important is the cohesion between the different provinces. So we can see the reflection of that, realization in 1972 policy, where it says, for national cohesion, it is necessary for the people of one region to understand the language and literature, social structure and customs, attitudes, and motivations of the people of the other regions. So that was a direct outcome of that experience of 1971. And after that, I think those who are in Pakistan, you could see that after this, governments set up some Pakistan studies departments in different universities. The purpose was that we should be, respecting the culture and the language of other provinces. Remember that in 1959, a timeline was given that in that time we should be replacing English with Urdu. And then in 1973, our new constitution was framed. And in this new constitution, we gave another deadline, right? The national language of Pakistan is Urdu, the constitution says, and arrangements should be made for its being used for official and other purposes within 15 years from the commencing day, right? So if you can, you add 15 to 1973, I think we come to 1988. That was the deadline that everything should be done and English should be replaced by Urdu. And then another very interesting addition we see in that constitution. The English language may be used for official purpose until arrangements are made for its replacement by Urdu. But we still see that, English is going strong and strong. And then we see a clause in 1973 Constitution, without prejudice to the status of national language, a provincial assembly may by law prescribe measures for the use and teaching of a provincial language in addition to the national language. This was, I think, a very important clause, but most of the provinces did not make use of this. I think I recall that in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, when Awami National Party was ruling, they did some work and they approved certain local languages. And now, then comes another language policy, education policy in 1979. And here, I think that was the time of General Ziaul-Haq, consideration for medium of instruction, approved provincial languages and their place in the education system, national language and the programs of its adoption as medium of instruction, the importance of English language, particularly at the higher level of education. Now comes a very important, notification. One fine morning, a notification was issued that all Pakistani schools throughout the country will be required to adopt Urdu or an approved provincial languages as the medium of instruction, the nomenclature of English medium schools will be abolished. This was a very strict, notification. And as usual, it was not consulted with the stakeholders. The result was that, after I think 6 months, 7 months, we had to come back to the actual situation because it was very, it was unrealistic, because this notification said that all English medium schools should be using Urdu as medium of instruction. Ironically, uh, not only this notification became dysfunctional, but in that period of time, Zia's time, there was mushrooming of private sector schools, and most of them were English medium schools. Then we see this period was 1992. English may be used as one of the mediums of instruction in addition to Urdu, our provincial language. At tertiary level, English may be the medium of instruction for science and technology. English is an international language and important for competition in a globalized. This is the time of Pervez Musharraf, and this policy, though later it was issued by People's Party, but most of the work on this policy was done during Pervez Musharraf's period. There is a lot of emphasis was on English, and it was during those times that English was made a compulsory subject from class 1. Now, I think we can go on and on and on, but I'll stop here. And I would like to, take your questions and your comments as well. But before we come to closure, I would like to share with you some recommendations. I think we need to plan a language policy properly in consultation with different stakeholders, right? I gave you one example that in Zia's times, one fine morning, we went to one extreme. Then in Punjab, in Shahbaz Sharif's time, English was declared as medium of instruction in primary schools. So that was, again, a very, extreme position. After a decade or so, now in this regime, in Punjab government, they brought it back to Urdu. So these movements, one extreme and then another extreme, this means that we do not believe in doing proper homework, and there is no proper planning. The result of this is that there is a lot of unsettling and uprooting the educational practices. Then we need to have a reliable linguistic data. We don't have at present. I think we need to have those departments which should be collecting data, and that data should be reliable, because only then we should be able to make good, effective policies. Need for consultative process, I shared with you. Arrangements should be made on consistent basis to ensure the promotion, growth, and empowerment of national and provincial languages. Especially provincial languages are ignored, and it varies from province to province. But I see that, for instance, in Sindh, there is a lot of work for a Sindhi language, but in Punjab, there is not much work done for Punjabi, and so forth and so on. Because, when we say empowerment, the vitality of language largely depends on educational support. and if we don't have these languages in our educational system, then we have a serious problem. Need for an additive approach. Well, it's not a zero-sum game that if we, teach Urdu or if we learn English, we should not be, learning our own, provincial languages. But the approach should be additive that, yes, I have this language and let me add another language to it. So it's fine to learn English, but I think at the same time, we should be preserving and making our, own languages, strong languages, which should be used in different domains. The language policy needs to realize the pragmatic need of English as a global language, together with the cultural identity linked with national and provincial language. So, no doubt, English has its own pragmatic value, but language is not just there as a license to get a good job. Language is a very important identity marker as well. So, if we want to preserve our own identity, I think it's very important that we should be promoting and owning our own languages. The vitality of a language is often linked with academic support it gets from educational institutions. I can share with you the case of Punjabi language. It is not taught in any school. So how can you expect it is taught? I mean, it is a subject at higher level, but I think if we want to promote a language, it must be a part of children, primary education. Yeah, I shared it with you. The provincial languages should be taught as a subject in the schools. And Urdu, there is a lot of, political slogans about Urdu. Supreme Court has given a verdict that Urdu should be used as for correspondence, but on ground, we don't see any concrete measures for that. And this can only be done if Urdu is associated with domains of power in Pakistan. And there should be some pragmatic value attached with it. And finally, let me bring it to a closure that Pakistan, I think it's a very lucky country that we have around 76 languages spoken in this country. But the other part of it is that a number of these languages are endangered. And I think as community, as teachers, as students, we must do something for these languages. And also at state level, some serious work needs to be done. Because when a language dies, it's not just a bunch of words or expressions die, but with that, a whole viewpoint dies. So if we want to have a very diverse culture here, we need to do something for the promotion and for the promotion and legitimization of these provincial languages as well. Thanks very much. I stop here, and I will be very happy to take your questions or comments.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shahid Saab, for taking us through the history and background of language politics. And, it was insightful to hear from you. Now the floor is open for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll be taking your questions to Dr. Shahid Saab. So, yeah, there was a question from Asifa Harun, and she asked, it was an interesting question, she asked about the role of mothers in preserving the native mother language or mother tongue.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And one very simple, response is that mothers should do this. But I think there is a bigger challenge, and that challenge is that of globalization. That change is that the challenge is that of language attitude. What is viewed as kind of elite language, right? And every mother and father would like to see that their kids or their children should be exposed to that language, which is beneficial, or the kind of linguistic capital which is important. So we see this in practice that uh, at least in Punjab, I see that, especially in urban houses, that mother is, we take pride, not just mothers, but fathers as well. We take pride that, whenever there are some guests that would say, what is this? It's a nose, eyes, and we get so excited. There is no problem with that. But at the same time, I think, and I know some good examples as well, some houses where they expose their students to their mother tongue as well. And I think, since you mentioned mother is can play important role, because most of the time kids are with mother. And I think, for pragmatic use English or any other, but I think if you dedicate some time to expose your children to your own mother tongue, I think it's very important in many ways, especially your identity and your association with your own roots and your cultural kind of affinity. It's very important.
Great, Shahid. And there's a question from Shagufta Amir, and she asks that, how can an English language teacher preserve the identity of regional and national languages?
Well, the thing is that, I think, let me clarify my own position. Yeah, I'm not, part of that group of people who believe that, okay, we should cut off with English and we should be focusing on Urdu. I am a great believer that we should be, learning and teaching English. But as I said, it should be additive approach. We add English, but at the same time, we should not be, leaving our own language. We should take pride in that. My own example, if I'm an English language teacher, and those who know me, they also know that I write in both the languages. I write in English, I write in Urdu, and I think, when I write in Urdu, I've been, there is a different kind of feeling, and my access in Urdu is more as compared with English with the masses. So it's not either or a thing. English, I mean, if you ask me, in Pakistan, there are examples. For instance, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, his own subject, he was an English language person, teacher. Iqbal, his own, subject was English. Deen Muhammad Tasir, his own. And there are so many examples. Shamsur Rahman Faruqi. So I don't see that there is a problem with that, if you are English language teacher, you cannot go beyond that.
Wonderful. Nasser Mahmood Saab has his hand raised. I'm unmuting Nasser Saab. Would you ask your question yourself?
Yes, thank you. थैंक यू डॉक्टर शाहिद. मैं उर्दू में बोलना पसंद करूंगा, अगर आप अलाउ करें तो प्लीज.
आप उर्दू बोले, मैं अगर बाकी लोग हैं उनके लिए ट्रांसलेट में कर दूंगा.
जी 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 सर, मैं इंग्लिश का ही असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर हूँ और रऊफ क्लासरा साहब का डाई हार्ट फैन, उनके जरिए से आपके मुतालिक पढ़ता रहता हूँ और आपकी माशाल्लाह काबिश. तो सर, मैं लिंग्विस्टिक्स का टीचर होने की वजह से मेरा जो क्वेश्चन है वो ये है कि रिसेंटली आई एम स्टडिंग पंजाबी लैंग्वेज एंड इट्स हिस्ट्री. तो उसमें जो इंडिया की साइड पर पंजाबीज हैं और उसके जो हमारे स्कॉलर्स हैं, वो ये बेसिकली जो मैं जिस पॉइंट पे पहुंचा हूँ कि वो हम रिलीजन के साथ जब लैंग्वेज को जोड़ते हैं तो वो ये कहते हैं कि पंजाबी जो है ये आर्याई लैंग्वेज है, बिकॉज वो संस्कृत के साथ इसको जोड़ते हैं और वो उसका उधर से लिंक करते हैं। हमारा जो पाकिस्तान का एरिया है इसमें हम इसको गैर आर्याई क्रैक कह के द्राविड़ी जुबान के साथ रिलेट करके तो गोया हमारा हेरिटेज मुस्लिम के साथ मिल रहा है। ये चलें एक बहस है जिस पर बात चल रही है, लेकिन रिसेंटली जो मेरा मेन इशू हमारा चल रहा है, देयर इज ए ग्रुप ऑन सोशल मीडिया दैट इज पंजाबी सेवक सांझ। तो आई एम पार्ट ऑफ दैट एंड आई एम ए स्टूडेंट ऑफ लिटरेचर एंड स्पेशली पंजाबी लिटरेचर एज वेल, तो थोड़ा बहुत उससे ताल्लुक रहता है। सर ये अभी एक डिवाइड चली हुई है पंजाबी और सराइकी लैंग्वेज के हवाले से, कि पंजाबी वाले जो हैं वो ये कहते हैं कि जी सराइकी जो है ये पंजाबी का एक डायलेक्ट है, whereas the people living in South Punjab they claim it to be another separate language। तो ये जो हम कभी मजहबी बुनियादों पर और कभी जियोग्राफिकल जो हमारी बाउंड्रीज हैं उनकी बेस पर जो करते हैं लैंग्वेजेस, तो उसी की बेस पर पहले पार्टीशन हो चुकी हुई है ऑलरेडी। तो ऐसे में एकेडेमिया का, इंटेलेक्चुअल्स का, राइटर्स का, स्टूडेंट्स का, स्कॉलर्स का और हम जैसे स्टूडेंट्स का क्या रोल होना चाहिए, और इसको किस तरह से हम इमोशनली की बजाय एक बहुत जो पॉजिटिव इसका रोल हमारा अदा करते हुए इसको बजाय इसके कि हम और कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स बनाएं, हम इसको कैसे इसको रिजॉल्व कर सकते हैं। थैंक यू सर।
Okay, thanks very much. I think it's a very good question you asked that, people, they try to associate their languages and they try to claim that our language is older, our language is better. I think it's a very important question. And one way of looking at a language, and in the past, people used to say like that X language is superior and Y language is, inferior, right? Or English is superior and, Urdu is inferior. Or Urdu is superior and Punjabi or Sindhi is inferior, right? First of all, let me, look at this statement. I believe that no language is inferior or superior in its essence, right? What makes a language superior or inferior is basically the socio-economic status of the speakers of that language, right? Take the example of Farsi, for instance. In Indo-Pak, there was a time when Farsi was considered as the language of scholars. And if you don't know Farsi, you cannot be a knowledgeable person. Ask your, forefathers. But the same language, if you now look at its position in Indo-Pak, it's nowhere, right? And the reason is that at that time, it was supported by those people, kings, etc., right? And it was made language of courts because it was their language, right? And the moment that, sport was removed by the British, it lost its strength. So coming back to that all languages are equal, they must be respected, and the socio-economic status of socio-economic status of speakers of a language, it gives hint that this is a superior language, and it is not fixed. Maybe that status, in this century is at the top, but in the next century it goes down, right? The second important thing is that we talked about that is the linguistic diversity, right? There are two approaches to that. One approach is called melting pot approach. The dominant group thinks that here is a melting pot and all other cultures and all other languages should come to this melting pot and become one, right? Imagine that if there is just one language in this world, how boring it would be, right? Imagine that if you go to a garden and you could see just one color of flower, how boring it would be, right? So that was the essence of, when the imperialist powers came to colonies, they would try to impose their own culture, right? And but the second approach is the diversity. There is a beauty in diversity, right? The more languages, the more colors, the more flowers, it will make your life, your world beautiful, which also means more languages also means more viewpoints, right? So when you look at this, that Hindi or Seraiki or Potwari, I think it's good that there is a lot of diversity there, right? And as I said, when we try to differentiate, most of the time it is done not on linguistic basis, but on political basis, right? Okay.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shahid Saab. And our next question is about linguistic diversity. As we talk about linguistic diversity on, International Mother Language Day. So, what do you think? Why it is considered as a threat? Especially in the context of Pakistan.
I think, as I said, this diversity is so important that we should respect others' cultures. We should respect others' viewpoint. We should respect other languages. And I think we are in a very fortunate position to learn other languages as well. And that would lead to kind of more understanding of others' viewpoint as well. Let me show you, where is it? I'm so happy that one of my books has been translated into Sindhi. Can you read it? Can you read it?
Let me see. I cannot read it,
Oh,
but
okay.
I have seen this. Yes, yeah. So,
Okay. Well, I
yes,
can give you a hint. It is a translation of my Urdu novel, Adhe Adhure Khab. I think it's Anpura Khab,
right.
something like that.
Anapura
And
Fab. Yes, yes.
yeah,
Anapura
yeah,
Fab.
yes. And the same book is translated into Punjabi, Ad Pachade Sufne, right? And now it is being published in Pashto as well. So I think we as teachers, as scholars, we should be respecting other languages and try to, try to not only learn, but acknowledge them and celebrate them. I think these are the steps. First, acknowledge the diversity, respect the diversity, and then celebrate the diversity.
Wonderful. What a wonderful way to put it. So, yeah, Mahmoud Hassan asked that in the light of 18th Amendment, where does Urdu stands now?
Well, I think I am one of those people who always favored 18th Amendment. And I wrote, I used to write for Dawn, I think, in those times. I favored, again, the same principle that provinces should be given this freedom to work on their own cultures, on languages, etc. Right? But as far as Urdu is concerned, nobody is ignoring Urdu. What we are saying is our own languages, provincial languages besides Urdu, right? Remember that initial demand of Bangla, right? So it's not either or question. Nobody, no province is saying that, that we don't want to. Urdu is our, as I said, emotional identity. But at the same time, I think we need to acknowledge and celebrate our local languages, our local heroes as well.
Great. Another question is, rather than identity, is it useful to consider a language for future prospects?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't get it.
Yes, the question is, rather than identity, is it useful to consider a language for future prospects?
Well, definitely. Language has different kind of, dimensions. We That is why I say that I'm a great believer that we should be, learning more languages for pragmatic purposes. So that is why when parents decide about their schools of their children, every parent would like to send them to English medium schools, right? Because they always thinking that this is a kind of passport for their prosperity, right? And if you look at the the ads, job ads, it's very interesting study, especially of multinational companies. They don't ask you for CGPA. They don't ask you for what was your grade. They ask you for two things: interpersonal skills and communication skills. Right. So I think it's in your future prospect, your linguistic capital or your language proficiency is going to play a very important part in the 21st century skills, as Harari in his book 21 Lessons for 21st Century puts it. Some of the skills which are going to be very important 21st century, 50 years from now, are creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. So this communication is very important, and you have to be proficient in the language.
Wonderful. And a very interesting question. It's about a single national curriculum. But I would like to know your take on single national curriculum and what you think about it. But first of all, I would like to put it into perspective or give it background. If you could talk about what was the single national curriculum thing, and then your take on it for those who are not from Pakistan and don't understand things, and also for those who don't understand in Pakistan.
Okay, it's not a very popular, you know, not popular stance I take on national single national curriculum. I think this is what is professed, that single national curriculum is there to, to reduce the socioeconomic gaps in the society and make people, to reduce the differences between schools, etc. I think that was the major premise of this single national curriculum. Well, I have a very different view about it for two reasons. A, that I see the difference between these two terms, curriculum and textbooks, right? So I was actually surprised that when people sitting in the center, they are sending out written books to different provinces, right? Because the claim was it's a single national curriculum, not the textbooks. Now I'm coming to the major argument why I have doubts about single national curriculum. That to me, curriculum is a very wide, kind of notion. It is not just a statement of, activities planned or unplanned, right? I see curriculum as, a blend of students, teachers, teaching materials, assessment, and school milieu. All these things make curriculum. So if you are just making one curriculum, same for, say, Etchison College, and you implement the same curriculum in Patoki of Punjab or some remote village of Sindh. You just tell me, are we going to get the same results? No. And the simple reason is that just making same curriculum implementing same curriculum in two places won't do, because in HSN or any other elite school, the socioeconomic background of students is different. The socioeconomic background of faculty and their qualification and their exposure is different. Similarly, the assessment system is different. The school milieu is different. So unless we try to do something, some concrete measures to reduce these inequalities, we cannot just say that, okay, same curriculum, everything is going to be okay. So this is my take on it. And I have, as I said, I have doubts about it. And those who want to know my viewpoint in detail, my email, I have given my email, and I can send out to you what I have written about it. Let me show you the email. You can, this is my email. shahidksiddiqui@gmail.com. And those who are interested, just send me a one-liner and I'll send you what I wrote, on single national curriculum.
Wonderful. Let me look at if there are any other questions for Shahid Saab. There was a question on medium of instruction, that there are institutions with certain medium of instruction. So how can we use this practice of translanguaging with a certain medium instruction? And do you find any space or place of native tongues in this scenario?
Well, I think just a minute. Yeah. Well, I think that as far as local languages are concerned, apart from schools, well, in schools as well, as we say that in school, in pedagogy, you can use sometimes this bilingual, strategy, that sometimes when students are stuck, and instead of spending more time on the same, English medium, you can give. But apart from that, there are some very interesting ways to promote, your own language. For instance, you can organize exhibitions. You can organize competitions among your students in their own language. Similarly, these book fairs, similarly conferences, so that constantly they're exposed to their own identity, their own languages. And also some classes, and I'm not sure whether in Sindh, because in Sindh there is a lot of political awareness about the culture and language, but especially in Punjab, we need to do something, especially for urban Punjabis, to make them realize that how important is their mother tongue, and especially the children, because some very serious kind of observation. If you look at the table where there was percentage of mother tongue, and if you compare 20 years table from today's table, you see that almost all languages, Sindhi and Pashto and languages, their percentage went up. But the Punjabi's percentage came down. And the simple reason was that a number of Punjabi parents living in urban areas, they would like to write in that column of mother tongue Urdu instead of Punjabi. So these kind of things, I think maybe later on there will be a greater realization. But I think it's not, as I said, and I'm repeating, it's not either our question. Urdu is our national language, and we respect that. But at the same time, I think if you want to keep this diversity of this country, linguistic diversity, you must do something for our, provincial languages.
Over time, we have seen this movement of making all the provincial languages or regional languages as national languages. So, there's sense of ownership and for the proliferation and for the promotion of all these languages. How do you see these, what's your
Well,
response on this?
well, I'm not sure that, but I think I can share with you a simple principle. Somebody used here future prospect. I think simple principle is that in today's world, which is very pragmatic, you must have a reason to learn that language. So if we want to promote these languages, we must link them with some power domains.
Great. Farzana Khan asked that how can we preserve our identity by preserving and promoting our language since we are bound to use official language?
Okay. I think we can use official language in official domain, but most of the time we are outside our office, we are at home, and we are at marketplace, or we are somewhere else, and nobody is forcing us to not use our own language. Right.
And one of the reasons linguists tell is that we are not transmitting our own language into our future generations. We are not talking to our children in our native language, our mother language. As when you are told that we take pride in taking some other language, and
Yes.
kind of this feeling that our children know this language. So yeah, these are simple things, but they can change the whole scenario of a language, and if you are sensitive about it, so you can do much within your own capacity. And yeah, it's great. So thanks very much for your wonderful talk, Dr. Shahid Saab. In the last, any final message as we are celebrating our International Mother Language Day webinar series?
Well, thanks very much. And I must say that you people are doing a wonderful work. And these are the things we must be, talking about our own languages, our own culture, and especially in Pakistan, which was a colony. I think it's more important that we keep on decolonizing. And one of the ways of this process of decolonization is that go back to our roots and try to recognize them, acknowledge them, and celebrate our own identity, our own roots, our own architecture, our own food, our own language, our own literature. And these are, some of the, those points of, satisfaction that we should not be closing these doors to our, young generation, our own children. We should be make them peep through that past, which is so beautiful.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. We really appreciate your time and expertise. And thank you very much all for your participation. If you want certificate for this session, you can email at info.tdwebinars@gmail.com. For our future webinars, please visit our website www.tdwebinars.org. And we are available on all our social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @tdwebinars. So please tag us with your takeaways from today's talk with Dr. Shahid Siddiqui. We'll really appreciate that. And in the last, I would like to close this session with some of the verses from Sheikh Hayaz, a Sindhi poet, about mother language. He said, "Panji ॿोलीअ में मियां जॾहिं चवंदे माउ तोखे अहिड़ो साउ ॾींदी ॿी ॿोली किथां."